And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with the Game Boy Geek.
Hello my friends, the Game Boy Geek here. We are at Earth and we're in trouble because there's a bunch of meteors coming down to destroy us, and they're coming through the 5 different layers of the altitude, and eventually we're trying to stop them from hitting Earth so we don't die. This is a real-time 5-minute cooperative game where you can't talk, you're playing cards together cooperatively. It's from Mayday Games here. It's a 5-minute time game, very interesting. Let me show you how it's played. I'll see you on the other side. Here we have Meteor set up for 3 players. With 3 players, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 meteors that we're trying to kill. And we have to do this in a real-time game. There's 5 levels of altitude. We're trying to kill them before we get through all the levels of altitude and the meteors finally hit Earth. So how the game works is this timer is going to get flipped. It's a minute long, and people will be playing cards. There's no turns in this game. Everyone is just playing at the same time. There's also no talking in the standard game. You cannot talk, but you can gesture. And so what they're trying to do is destroy some of these meteors before this timer goes. Once this timer gets down to the end, well, we've lost 1 thing of altitude, and some bad things happen. So let's talk about how a turn works. Well, again, there are no real turns. Everything's happening at once. Each of the players has a launch site. And at that launch site, they're going to be trying to put together rockets and resources to go off and try to blow up these meteors. And so there's different types of cards in your hand that you can play. First, there's resource cards. We have red, which is chemical. We have yellow, which is fuel. We have green, that's atomic, and we have blue, that is electrical. Now, each of these, they're not equal. There's the most reds, then there's the second most yellows, the third most greens, and the least amount is blues. So there's a different distribution in the deck. So these are more valuable. Now, when you play a card, you have to be the first person to play a card on your launch site, but once you've played a card on your launch site, anybody can add to it. So everyone's going to be playing cards on yours, you're going to be playing cards on others as long as they themselves added 1 card there. There's also different rockets in the game. That's a different type of card. Anywhere ranging from a 1 to a 5, and they need different types of fuel depending on what they are. So the 1 just needs 1 fuel, the 5 needs 3 fuel, the 3 needs a chemical and an atomic to be able to launch. And once those rockets are launched, they can attempt to destroy a meteor of that value, 1, 3, or 5. So that's the rockets. We'll get into that later. Let's go to the last types of cards that's in the game. We also have technology cards. So a rocket plant, someone has to play an atomic on this to activate it. But once they do, it's active for the whole game and for everybody. And people can discard any 2 resource cards, which are basically the ones we've been showing you. The backs of them look like this. You can discard any 2 of those to go through the discard pile and grab any rocket that you're looking for. Or maybe you got the resource plant. Anytime one of these timers goes off, which is a bad thing, everyone gets to draw 1 more card than normal. So again, it lets you break the rules of the game. So you have technologies, you have resources, and you have rockets. Those are the 3 different things that you're trying to build on your launch site. All right, so again, let's say we start the game, this starts going, and again, it's in real time and there's no talking. So let's say I throw down a rocket. Now you don't have to throw down a rocket first, but again, you have to be the person that throws the first card here. So let's say I'm building a rocket. Once there's a rocket here, we can't add another one for pretty much the whole game because we're trying to build a rocket there, and this one only needs a yellow. So maybe somebody else sees that, plays a yellow here, and we can decide, this player can decide to launch. And we'll tell you why you might not want to launch now, but let's say he says launch. So again, there's no talking in this game. At any time, any point in the game, if you have a question about a rule, something, you could say timeout, and you hit the timer down, and you look up a rule. The other time you can talk is when you say launch. That's another thing that you can say. So let's say we launch. We can hit, we know that these 2 are between a strength of 1 and 3. So let's say we try to flip this one over and kill it. Oh, this is a 2. The rocket was launched, but it does not kill it, so nothing happens. These get discarded, but now we know this is a 2. So maybe this player has a 2 rocket there, and somebody else plays this, and this guy says launch. Well, this rocket with 2 will now destroy this, and it's gone. Woo-ha, we're down 1 meteor. Now, I wasn't watching this time on purpose, but when this timer goes off, basically we have to stop the round. This has now, we've gone through basically an altitude change, so we're gone through 5. Now we're on 4. Now before we do that, depending on the amount of players you are, you'll draw some cards. With 3 players, each people would get 2 more resource cards to help them out, and then we would start 4, and then we'd have another minute at this altitude level. Let's say, okay, we want to go after one of these 3 to 5 rockets there, because I have a 5 rocket. So boom, I throw down a 5 rocket, it needs 3 fuel, and let's just say between all the 3 players, we end up getting 3 fuel, and we're ready to launch this 5 rocket. So let's say I say launch, I say I'm going for this one, I flip it over, ooh, it was a 4. Well, 5 is greater than 4, so the good news is this meteor gets killed. The bad news is that we overdrove, or we overkilled, because 5 was greater than 4, and what happens is we actually lose because that overkilled, it shot all of its extra stuff towards the other meteors and it made it closer to Earth. And so we actually, no matter where the timer would be at that point, we lose in altitude. So it helped us, but if you do it early in the round, it really hurts you because you go to the next altitude and you get more cards that way. So how else do you get cards? Well, other than getting cards when you lose an altitude rating, you can get cards in another way as well, called retrofitting. If on any player's launch site, there are 4 of the same resource, a retrofit happens, and essentially 5 new resource cards are dispersed amongst the players, and it dispersed differently depending on how many players are playing. Or you can do 4 different, one of each resources can help you retrofit. You can also retrofit rockets. You could do any 4 of the same rocket, or you can do any 4 different rockets, and any of those is a valid retrofit, which gives the whole team 5 cards dispersed differently depending on how many players there are. There's also some of the meteors, the bigger ones, you can see on both sides. They just let you see what it looks like because it's very large, and what you'd have to do is, well, hey, the highest rocket's a 5, so you would actually have to, in this case, if you want to kill it good, is somebody would have to launch a 3 and someone would have to launch a 4 at the same time. They would at the same time say launch, and they could then get this one, obviously assuming that you got the right resources for those rockets, but that's how you can double up on one of those and take it there. Some meteors have a special ability, like this one, it's a fast meteor, so it has to be killed before your altitude level gets to 1. If 1 happens and this meteor's still there, the game's over. Also, if you get through all of your levels here without all of them being there, the game's over and you lose. The only way you win is by getting rid of all the meteors, assuming that one's not there, before you get through the level 1 and they hit Earth. Now what I showed you was basically the base game. The easy game, the beginner game, essentially you get to see what all of these are beforehand. So you not only get to see what they are, so you don't have to try to hit them first and then flip them over. At the beginning of the game, you get to see what the values of all the meteors are. Also, you can talk. So the first time you play the game, you play it with all these up, you play it, you can talk. Play it that way until you can beat it. It might take 2 or 3 tries, actually, because the game's still pretty hard. And then once you get better at it, you flip these over and you can't talk. Now, some of these meteors have special abilities, like this is the hidden meteor. It has to be the last one blown up. This one needs at least 1 green atomic card with the rocket to beat this, and so on and so forth. There's all different types of special abilities that do things. Some of them bring out new meteors, some of all sorts of things like that. Sometimes they do good things for you. Most of the time, they're bad for you. And so that's sort of the easy game where you flip all these up. There's also an advanced game. Now the advanced game adds 3 different modules that you can add or subtract. There's boss meteors, there's powers, and there's challenges. Let's take a look at these. Now the boss meteor would basically take the place of one of the meteors that starts the game. This one, wow, is worth 11 just by itself. This one essentially would make the first 2 meteors both the fast, which means you got to get rid of them before altitude level 1. This one, essentially, anytime you launch a rocket, they have to throw an additional resource card with it. Things like that just makes the game a lot harder. And here's some of the power-up cards. Additional launch site. So this adds another launch site that people can use in the game to put cards down, because now once you put cards in here, I forgot to mention earlier, is let's say I started with a rocket, but then later on I don't decide it. You can throw everything out from your launch pad out to the discard pile and start fresh again. But this gives you an additional one to work with. A lunar harvest. Anytime a rocket that you have used to explode a meteor, you get to draw an extra card. Anytime you get to the next altitude level and the timer goes down, you draw an extra card. Things like that help you out. And here's some of the challenge cards, for example, that makes it a lot harder. Electrical shortage. You could not play any of the blue resource cards on your launch pad. Doomed. Oh, you get an automatic 1 to 3 meteor in front of you that only you can try to destroy. Hydrological differences. you have to put this in front of somebody else's launch pad, and you cannot contribute to their launch pad, things like that. And those are all the different modules you can add in the advanced game. All right, there's Meteor. I typically like co-op games. I typically like real-time games. So this fit right in there. I love the artwork. I like the theme. So did it play out how I wanted? Yes, I think this is a very fun cooperative game. Let me just get the only negative thing about it out of the way. For as simple of a game that it is, mechanically, and for as short as the game is, for 5 minutes, there's a little bit of a learning curve there to get people understanding, because you can't talk, and what you can play on yours, and you have to play first, and retrofitting sometimes throws their brain in a tizzy, because you can do all the same or all different on resources or rockets. There's quite a bit of a learning curve for them to figure it all out for a quick 5-minute game. It will take 2 or 3 games for them to really understand it. And for a game that's that short, it's kind of odd. But that's the only negative thing I could say about this game, because other than this, I really liked it a lot. I liked, it gave me the feeling of sort of Hanabi, where you can't say certain things unless you're giving a clue, and it's quiet, and there's this unspoken language. Kind of happens with this, because you can't talk, but you can gesture, and you're trying to, point this, I want this, and you're trying to come up with this thing. Now there's a gray area that once you are good enough and your group gets good enough and you start coming up with a language, then you're essentially talking anyway, and so you're supposed to kind of throw that out and start over again with different language. But it's really good. I like it. I like how there's a beginner game that you can play with face up all the cards. You can talk, gets people learning the game very fast. Then you go to the base game, which still is probably pretty hard. And then you have all those 3 modules with the bosses, the powers, and the challenge to totally ratchet up or down the difficulty as the game, as you get used to it, as maybe it might grow a little thin as you've played it many times, because it's so short. You'll play this game probably 3 or 4 times every time it comes out, because it's so short and it's very quick to set up. I liked it. I like the co-op aspect. I like the fact that you can't talk. I like you're working together. I like how there's no turns. So anybody that has a problem with the alpha gamer telling everybody what to do does not happen in this game. That completely removes it from this game. So I really like that. The artwork is great. It's fun. It's sort of thematic. Some of those cards have the special abilities. Now, another part of that sort of the negativity at the beginning is there are a lot of cards. There's a card glossary. There's a lot of special abilities between the technologies and some of the cards, and it will take a while to learn those. So for a game that's so simple and so short, there's quite the learning curve. It's not a difficult game by any means. It's pretty easy, but the first time you see it, there's a little bit more to grasp than it would appear for a 5-minute game. But it's excellent. I really like it. Anyone that likes co-ops, I think you should check this one out, because it's really fun. And anybody that likes the tension of real time as well. Lots of fun. If this seems interesting to you, if you like real time, you like co-op, check out Meteor.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.